everybody, welcome to Module 2. Great job so far in Module 1. I have loved watching some of your videos and reading some of your discussions. It's been great so far to get to know some of you and again to see so many familiar faces. All right, so we are off to the races and we are diving headfirst into the topic of everything related to sport communication. During this week or this next week and a half for our module, we have a lot of ground to cover. We do have a somewhat of a shortened module because we have a shortened week this week with the day being off on Monday for Martin Luther King Day. So make sure that you take a look at everything that this module has to offer and really map out your plan for success over the next week and a half or 12 days to get everything done. There are 6 key areas that we're going to discuss. So the first thing is the growth and the magnitude of the sport industry. And there are several different assessments that I've included for the dollar value of the sport industry as a whole. Don't be overwhelmed by this. This is a progression of the growth of the industry. So you'll have to read it and see. I start probably 30 years ago and then work our way up to more recent dollar values. So make sure that you just don't get lost in the jumble of all those numbers. Really pay attention to the years that I've denoted for how the industry has grown. I've included examples from several different industries. So the NFL, the NBA, I have also included significant soccer organizations. We talk about the NCAA, but it's important to note that the exact dollar value is a little bit challenging to pinpoint. And you're probably asking why. Well, it's really hard to gather all those data points to every element of the industry. For example, it's hard really to understand how much people personally spend on sport activities. So when we think of the sport industry, these dollar values are trying to assess as much data as we can gather. But there is just simply so much related to sport that sometimes that's hard to gather all that information. For example, how much people spend on golf memberships. Some membership clubs are private, so that information isn't shared with the public. So it's really hard to understand how profitable private golf memberships are. It's also hard to understand how much people spend on fishing. Some people negate whether or not fishing is really a sport. I think it is, so it is included in here, but it's hard to understand what people spend on fishing, on the products, but then also on their fishing licenses and going out to actually participate in the sport of fishing or casually in fishing. Same thing with skiing. How much do people spend on skiing, on swimming, on running? So all of those seemingly lesser popular, I say lesser very respectfully, but lesser popular sporting activities, and it's hard to gather all that data. These numbers also do not include or consider the entire health and fitness industry. So understand that looking at these numbers, there's an entire segment of the industry or segments of the industry that are not even included. So make sure that you take a lot of that information with a grain of salt because it is constantly evolving and it doesn't necessarily include everything. At the end of the section, I also mentioned that the industry is expected to grow over the course of the next several years with the continuation of the growth of social media. Naturally, we are part of that growth right now, but also esports and the now legalized sport betting process. So that for a long time was illegal in every state other than the state of Nevada, but that act was overturned in 2018 and it is now available to become legalized in every state. Michigan, it has already been approved to be legalized here in our state, and in fact, some of the most recent reports that I've read is that it will become available for public participation as early as this Friday. Depending on when you're watching the video, that is Friday, January 22nd. So I've included a link in there for you to read up about that. The next topic we're going to cover is a review of television contracts and the growth of the sport franchise values. And we could spend all day assessing sport contracts. There is a wide assortment of contracts and challenges or changes with contracts over the years. And part of that is because the primary media networks are continuing to evolve. There's new and emerging media networks. Of course, with the growth of digital consumption, there's new platforms where prior to their introduction to what we know now today, we would never considered consuming our media in any way other than on the television, on the radio, or via newspaper, which were the primary forms of communication. Now we have all these different digital forms where we can consume information. So sport contracts and broadcasting contracts are continuing to change. So we could assess it and nitpick it all day long, but I tried to include some of the significant highlights in there. It's important to understand that television and broadcasting is a huge contributor to the sport communication industry, so that's why we talk about it. There is a demand and an increase for coverage and access as it becomes more and more available to people. People want more, and they want it in a variety of ways. They want to be able to pick and choose the way that they are consuming their favorite sports. So we will talk about that. The industry of itself is important to this particular sport because communication jobs will continue to have a significant role within the sport industry simply because of the continued growth of the industry. Everything from reporters to writers, production crews, network employees, executives, I mean, you name it, there is an opportunity as our industry continues to grow, specifically for the sport communication field. So we outlined some of those roles. There is a link to some additional roles that you can learn about or maybe consider if you've never considered that part of our industry before. So make sure you take a look at that. The next section we're going to take a look at is the variety of sport communication segment models. And segmentation means to divide the marketplace into parts or segments which are definable, they're accessible, they're actionable, and they're profitable. And they also have growth potential. So in other words, a company would find it impossible to target an entire market because of time and cost and effort restrictions. So how can we break it down and segment the model into different categories so that it is easier to put together a plan for business? So over the years, we've had many different types of academic theories or professional recommendations for how the industry is segmented. If you've taken my marketing course with me, you've already kind of had an introduction to this and know what that looks like. If you have not, this is a great place to get started to understand how the industry is categorized to help understand the consumer and determine the different market needs. So that's essentially why we segment the market into different ways. In this segment, we'll take a look at, or in this section, we'll take a look at several of the different suggested models of segmentation that different businesses can adopt when they put together their business plans of action. So this attention to communication is appropriate because sport communication plays a vital role in the management of sports. Without it, professionals would be unable to set their strategy, advertisers would be unable to promote products and services, and members of the media really would be unable to cover the sport because there wouldn't really be a way that we organize the industry. So that's what the segmentation models suggest. How is the industry organized and how do we really go about our business? To take that a little bit step further, it'll segue us into our next section, which is the Strategic Sport Communication Model, the SSCM. And the Strategic Sports Communication Model encompasses the many areas and perspectives associated with communication, as well as other sport-related segments and the communication field, such as marketing and management. So you'll take a look at that. At first, you'll look at it and you'll probably think, what is this? What are the arrows doing? And what are these three different categories? It's outlined there on the page, but then at the very bottom, there is also a video that I want you to watch that is extremely helpful into helping you understand the model of a strategic sport communication and really how it's laid out in the industry. Two of the important things I want you to understand is that communication in general, specifically for this model, is broken down into two separate components, and that is organizational and personal communication. When we're talking about organizational, there is a definition that they use that's called inter-organizational communication. So inter with an ER, and that is the exchange of information between an organization externally. So when they are externally communicating with their publics. So when the Detroit Lions put out a press release, when the Pistons share their schedule with you. That is interorganizational communication. They are communicating with you as an outside consumer. Then there's intra-organizational communication. So an RA, intra-organizational. And that's when they are communicating internally within the organization. So they're having meetings with coworkers, they're having meetings with different divisions, players to leadership, different units within the organization. That's intra-organizational. And then when that message is shared outward, that's inter-organizational. So that's when the message is no longer within the walls of their organization and it's going out. That's inter-organizational communication. Then we also look at personal communication. So very similarly, interpersonal is when you are communicating with somebody else. So how I'm communicating with you, how you communicate with your friends and your family, your coworkers, whoever it may be, that's interpersonal. You're communicating with somebody else. Intrapersonal is the language or the thought process that you have internally. So we all talk to ourselves, right? We all have intrapersonal thoughts. So thoughts that are in our head. We think, oh, that's a lovely song, or wow, the sun is shining. What outfit am I going to wear today? Do I want to have lunch now or do I want to have lunch later? Those are all things that happen within our mind. That's intrapersonal. When we're having a conversation with somebody outside of our minds, that's interpersonal. So intra is inside, inter is when we are exchanging with somebody else. So watch that model. There's a difference between intra and inter, whether it's organizational or personal. And this just helps you understand that flow of communication. It also has an example of an organizational chart. So what does an organization look like? Who is at the top of an organization? Who is the next level of leadership? Who reports to them? So it's a flow chart of responsibilities. It will show you what an organization looks like in terms of all the different jobs and positions that they have. So it's called an organizational chart, and it will have the president or the CEO or the owner or the athletic director, whatever type of sport organization you're part of will be at the top, whatever that head leadership position is. And then it branches down kind of like a tree into the next top leadership roles. And then who falls underneath them. And then what that does is it's going to show us all the people within all the units of an organization and where all the tasks are going to get done. So who is responsible for what? In our sense of this particular course, where all the communication gets done. So who is responsible for communicating what? So if you are in the facilities category, who's responsible for communicating the facilities needs and the protocols? If you are part of the public relations team, they are responsible for sharing all the information that falls within the category of public relations. If you fall under the marketing side, you're responsible for all of the marketing materials. What's the schedule? What's the promotion for the day? What time do the doors open? All of that information. So this model helps us understand how communication is organized within an organization and how all of it gets done. Oh. Apparently, my watch didn't understand that. Should we rewind it back again? I don't think so. You can rewind this again if you didn't understand. Anyway, so make sure you look at that strategic sport communication model. It can look a little bit overwhelming, but I want you to understand that it's important, particularly when you're starting to go enter the career fields. When you're ready to get that job and you're trying to understand how does communication flow, how does work flow, that'll be really helpful for you. The next thing is the dynamic history of sport journalism. So we're first going to take an overview of the history of journalism because we can't have sport journalism without, of course, the birth of journalism itself. So there's a great overview of journalism in general and how it segues into sport journalism. But then there's also 2 links at the bottom. So a lot of those statistics and facts and the progression of events I have borrowed from the links at the bottom of that page so that I can share with you, because really the way that they've outlined everything makes the most sense and is really easy for you guys to follow. So it's a 3-part process. Part 1 is shared on that page, and then part 2 and 3 is linked at the bottom. Make sure you read those links. The last thing that we're going to get to, if you've made it all the way through, is the traditional sport communication writing styles. So in this section, we talk about the different types of sport journalism. So there's 5 key areas. There's a straight game lead story, there's a feature story, there's profiles, there's season previews and recaps, and then there's columns. Those are the 5 main writing styles of sport journalism. Of course, there are occasions where you might find other styles, but those are going to be the 5 main styles that you'll see out in the industry. So there's explanations for each of those writing styles. There's examples for any of those writing styles. I've outlined the inverted pyramid method. News stories, specifically sports stories, are typically organized using the inverted pyramid style. So you'll see a graphic on there that shows you a pyramid that's inverted, in which information is presented in a descending order of importance. So the most important information is shared at the top. And then it allows the audience to read the most critical details quickly, and then they can decide whether or not they're going to continue reading. So as a writer, you share the most information, the most pertinent information, the most critical information at the top, and then it descends down like a funnel towards the bottom. So it's an inverted pyramid. There is a graphic in there for you to look at. There is a link to another article. Make sure you study that image, read the articles that I've included. That is part of your assignment for this week. So that last section will help you with our assignments. The last thing that you're going to have to do after the assignment is participate in our discussion post. And first you'll have to watch the TED Talk regarding how sports can help start meaningful conversations. And then you'll have to respond to those questions and comment on 2 of your classmates' posts. So a great video to watch and to engage in some excellent dialogue in how sport really is a segue to so many different segments of our industry, of our society. And sports has been that foundation for so many different topics to stand on and allow us to discuss as a society. And we are not going to shy away from that in our course, because it's great to discuss it. It's great to hear different points of view and hear your stories or personal experiences from a lot of these different suggested topics. So after you've done all that, you will be at the end of the module. To make it easier, there is a checklist at the very end that I've included that lists all of the required readings, the video, the discussion, and the assignment, just to be sure that you have completed everything. It is all due by Monday, January 1st. So make sure you stay on top. We'll now be on Monday rotations when everything is going to be due. So you can expect every Monday something will be due, and then after your due date, you'll have your new material presented for the next module. So if you have any questions, let me know. I am here to help you be successful. Other than that, good luck, and I will see you at the end of the module. Bye, everybody.